All right. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Special thanks to Stephanie, CITGO, and Reuters for putting this on. My name is Ross Boyden. I'm the founder and CEO of TruQC, a digitalization software and consulting company based in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm pleased to be joined by Stephanie Phipps from CITGO Petroleum. Stephanie, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello to those joining us today. My name is Stephanie Phipps. I've been at CITGO 12 years. I hold a mechanical engineering degree, and I've had various roles in the plant here at CITGO, from capital project engineer to an operations process engineer, as well as fixed equipment engineer, and most lately, a reliability fixed equipment supervisor.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to begin by setting the stage for how process digitalization, particularly for shutdown, turnaround, and maintenance, is becoming commonplace in the industry today. Under the larger umbrella of digital transformation, you see budget and initiatives by almost everyone in the industry. Some of you are likely part of some sort of digital initiatives yourselves. Until recently, anything with a digital and with the digital word in it was generally a corporate initiative, most often led by IT. However, recently there's been a shift as cloud-based mobile solutions with improved security have opened up opportunities for digital technology to permeate at the operational level. I'm going to refer to a Harvard Business Analytics survey titled Business Success with a Dual Track Approach to Transformation. In a survey of hundreds of executives, the majority identified productivity and efficiency as the primary goal of digital transformation. The vast majority of respondents agreed a dual track approach was required for success. I'll get back to dual track approach here in a second. And the vast majority of those surveyed, of those folks, believed that they did not have an effective current strategy. Intuitively, it means that digital technologies have to affect process at the operational level, particularly those with manual collection of sharing of data. Harvard defines dual track transformation in this way: an approach that simultaneously addresses enterprise-wide transformation, as well as the modernization of process that flows across business workflows and work groups. We call this bottoms-up introduction of technology. Realizing the promises of digitalization, promises such as efficiency, clean data, improved compliance, requires what Harvard Business Review refers to as rapid cycle innovation. In practice, this means effective solutions must have characteristics that enable prompt innovation and deliver quick wins for the business. Bottoms-up digitalization requires three key components. First is a champion, someone who understands at an operational level, that's an SME that understands process and lives in it day to day. The other two are speed and configurability. You must have a solution that is able to quickly be malleable and change with process, with the new requirements, with compliance requirements as they adjust within your business. Again, I am pleased to be joined by Stephanie from CITGO today. Stephanie was a lead mechanical engineer on a successful turnaround at CITGO's Lamont, Illinois refinery this year, working alongside the unit inspector and turnaround manager. We're going to walk through our experience introducing digitalization into that turnaround, specifically relating to flanges. Welcome again, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Let me first ask you to set the stage for everyone listening. Can you give us a little insight about your operation and the turnaround that you just experienced?
Sure. So the CITGO Lamont refinery is a 177,000 barrel per day refinery with an HF alkylation unit. That's hydrofluoric alkylation. And really that unit is important for gasoline production. That's where we get our octane. We recently completed our FCC Alky turnaround, which is a mega event for our site. It's one of the biggest turnaround events that we have. It lasts numerous weeks, and it runs 24 hours a day. An HF Alky unit requires extensive inspections above and beyond those required on other process units. Damage mechanisms that are specific to HF acid include flange face corrosion that's caused by the HF, and it's unique to an HF alkylation unit. We're required to visually inspect these flanges when they're open and available during a turnaround. For us, that's a database of over 1,700 flanges.
That sounds like a significant effort. Had you introduced any new technologies or methods for this type of turnaround in the past?
It is a significant effort. I'll agree with you there. This is my third turnaround on this unit, and I've seen this tracked 3 different ways. We've done 3 different methods. So the first was paper wall charts. If you can envision a printed database of 1,700 line items taped to the wall. And the drawback with that method was there was really a lag in updates. We didn't have real-time data, and we lacked depth in that data. Another method that we tried at another event was a mechanical contractor managing our flange inspection program. But with that, the drawback was the data wasn't available to us. And so we still saw room for improvement.
So updates, data availability, metrics. Sounds like you were seeking a better way to get the information, but weren't getting it. What did the other methods or previous solutions not consider?
So those solutions focused on completing a set of line items, completing those flange inspections, and they were really just looking at the completion. They didn't consider the benefit of real-time metrics. They didn't gather a ton of useful information for the future. So we didn't have a lot of in-depth measurements on our flanges, pictures of what they looked like, how they were found, how they were left. And it also didn't consider all of the work steps and the people that are involved in that workflow. It really just looked for the final product.
Thank you. What about this turnaround? What about the turnaround needs of yours seem to fit a work-based flow or workflow-based approach for digitalization?
So the flange inspections are a large and costly effort for an HF-ELKI turnaround. So it needs to be managed well. Also, our data set and the workflow that's involved in flange inspections lends itself to standardization and therefore digitalization. There's many disciplines involved in the workflow that all need to communicate throughout the entire process. And a lot of those people that are involved are going to be traveling to our site. So they're going to be not only new to the workflow, but new to our refinery in general, potentially. And we needed a solution that would help all of those people speak the same language and do so efficiently.
In the beginning, I talked about speed and configurability being the key to operational level digitalization. What did that mean to you and why was it so important?
So the ability to configure the solution was important to us because that would make it intuitive to the users that do know our workflow. We also wanted the ability to restrict access to protect our data. So a couple examples of that would be if we have a measurement and a result and a recommendation from an inspector, no one else should be able to change that information except the inspector, whether on purpose or inadvertently. Another example would be that if we have a flange that doesn't meet some of our criteria, no one should be able to make exception to that established criteria except the unit engineer with supporting calculations. Excuse me. So we wanted those permissions built in to our solution so that the entire workflow would follow the proper progression with little intervention. And it's important to understand that speed was set by our turnaround date. Turnaround was not going to wait for our digitalization solution to be ready. It was going to start whether we were ready or not. So we had a hard deadline that we had to meet for implementation. And all of those needs were discussed and addressed at the initial discovery meeting.
Discovery, can you tell us more about discovery? How long did that process take?
Sure. So in total, our discovery was just about 1 working day. But really that day was full of great collaborative energy and potential. The meeting is important because it's really a chance for the digitalization contractor to learn our objectives, our requirements, and our current process. And then together, the team can identify ways to improve upon inefficiencies that we see and streamline the process. Ross, really, it's your team that was doing the discovering. How did it feel from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks. Our goal as a digitalization partner is to allow the customer to be the SME of their operational process, and then for us to be the SME as it relates to digitalization of that process. It's our belief that technology should adapt to the process that's being done, not the other way around. So the solution should conform to the way that you do your work, not the contrary. So we spend our time listening to the customer, listen to understand their objective, the unique roles that they have, their unique workflow, and then we try to figure out how we can make that process exponentially more efficient than previous. Discovery served as a catalyst to enable technologies that allow configurability and cloud-based solutions. Did this technology create any internal barriers that were particularly difficult for you?
So from a personnel point of view, the inspector and I were ready to get started. We had lived through those previous failures, and so we were ready. However, information technology and information security were our first barriers when you talk about being a cloud-based solution. So what I learned is that it's important to find a digitalization contractor that is anticipating those hurdles and ready to respond. In our case, we were given a complete security package for our corporate IT and IS to review and ultimately approve.
Top-down initiatives are typically driven and led by IT, and thus they don't require approval once launched in terms of security. Bottom-up and operationally driven initiatives, however, begin at the field level so that they must go through and then comply with the IT security requirements of a particular asset owner. Because folks like you, operational champions, typically do not have the expertise or the ability to navigate through that process, it's up to the vendor, to the digitalization partner, to help handhold and move that partner through that process. And that's really where we think we can help. Now that we've covered preparation, let's look at the launch of the solution. Can you describe how you got started on site?
So talking about how we got started, I want to emphasize one thing to those that are considering process digitalization. And that's something, Ross, that you touched on in your opening, is find a champion. Find someone who has a vision for what the solution can do, how it'll be used, know where the person knows where the inefficiencies are, and they can see the benefits of a solution, of a digitalization solution. I would recommend that it's someone that has a role in the workflow, that'll be a user of the solution, and someone who has an interest in it being successful. And so really, I would say that there was two reasons for our execution and launch success. And that's that we had a champion and that we found a solution that was configurable, so much so that it became CITGO's flange solution, not a software package that was offered to us. So with those things, let me tell you how our launch went. By the time we had gone through the discovery meeting, the configuration, beta testing was completed, and our data was uploaded into the solution, we had 3 power users that needed no additional training. We had 3 people on site that were ready to use this software and knew the ins and outs of it. We are the ones that understand that data that was loaded in there. We are the ones that understand the workflow. We are the ones that determined those expected outcomes. And so, like Ross pointed out, we know that process, they know the software. We held user training on site ourselves, even though training assistance was offered by the vendor, because we had those power users. They knew what they needed to know to train the rest of the users. In total, we trained about 45 users, and that comprised of pipe fitters, boilermakers, QA/QC leads, engineers, API certified inspectors, maintenance planners, turnaround managers. So a wide variety of people were trained on their various roles to use this solution. And as the champion providing that training, it was my goal to make sure that everyone was comfortable and could see how the solution integrated with their roles. and fit in their normal tasks as a benefit and not a burden. I wanted the users to be ready to go on day one of the turnaround when that first flange was available for inspection. We were really fortunate to have great contractors that were open to using and learning this new technology. And after about a 3 or 4 hour training class, and sometimes less with some users, they were able to work efficiently within the software as designed with very little follow-up.
Thank you. I neglected at the beginning to kind of bring everyone's attention. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom. So before I move on, just bring your attention to the Q&A. If you have any questions during this, please don't hesitate to send them, and we'll take a look at the end. Thank you. So you mentioned contractors, Stephanie. How were you able to involve them effectively, and what was their response, and what was their thoughts on the new technology?
So we involved our contractors from the very beginning. I talked about that discovery meeting, which is when you're just getting started. We invited some of our main contractor leads to that discovery meeting. So they were involved from the beginning, and that's really because the vast majority of our users, about 85% or a little more, were going to be contractors, not CITGO employees. So it was mostly mechanical contractors and inspectors, with a couple of CITGO inspectors and engineers. But we really designed the tool with permissions based on their roles so that their tasks in the software were straightforward. And our contractors were very approving of this new technology. And I really believe that that's because it was easy to understand. It fit within their known task and field work, and it was not a burden.
How about the supervisors and engineers? Did they have a similar positive experience, and did they embrace it right away, or was it more difficult?
So we had talked about those previous failed attempts. And they were open to trying something new in hopes that it would be better, but really they had reservations based on their involvement in those past attempts and how involved they were. So for example, the inspector was afraid of a software failure. He was, very negative, saying, well, what if the software fails and we lose all of our data? What are we going to do then? I don't have a backup. Management had a lot of requirements for us centered around data metrics. They had a lot of things that they wanted to see from the metrics. But once all the groups and supervisors and managers understood that a well-established, secure digitalization solution existed, they were able to embrace the benefits that we described. And, when you're that champion, you're going to experience management pushing back sometimes. They're going to have questions, maybe on the return on their investment and the like. And it's really an asset to the champion if you have a digitalization vendor with proven success stories and statistics that they can share.
So once the turnaround started, it sounds like adoption was achieved pretty quickly with this new workflow-based approach. What was the first difference that you noticed related to execution and management of the activity?
So the first huge benefit for the inspector and I is that this entire effort of flange inspection and repair suddenly flowed by itself without intervention. And that was really being driven by the solution. Everyone had been trained, and they knew what they needed to do, both in the field and in the software. Now, obviously, we still received questions, but they were on appropriate items that required our additional attention. So we really got to focus on the important issues of the turnaround instead of spending our time managing the entire flange inspection effort. Second, providing details to management became extremely streamlined because it was live. The solution had a live, real-time dashboard of all of the metrics that our management asked for. And so those custom metrics were available to them in real time from their own devices whenever they wanted to see them.
So the data that you weren't getting in previous turnarounds, it seems like you are now getting that data and providing insights into your work. Can you speak to that data and what you were able to learn from it?
Sure. So in the past, we did qualitative inspections. So really, we just recorded a pass-fail result, and the data, like we talked about, was focused on completion of the work. There wasn't much to gain from that during the event and even afterwards, frankly. So what this allowed us to do was gain some insight during the event. It also gave us repair decisions. So, is this flange acceptable to run till the next turnaround, or does this flange need to be repaired? Obviously, that is the costly decision. That's going to require manpower. That's going to require machinery. But we have data now instead of qualitative results to back that up and justify those repairs. So we're in the turnaround, and maybe we completed about 100 flange inspections, maybe a little less. And looking at those real-time metrics, we notice that our new objective criteria that we created for this event to use within the software was overly conservative. And that's just really a decision that was made on our part going into the turnaround, not knowing how it would affect the outcome. So we're looking at our objective criteria, and it is overly conservative. And we were able to review that and make a decision to make a change during the event. And that's something that we never would have seen or had an opportunity to do before because the data just wasn't in front of us. We didn't have the numbers, and it wasn't real time. So even if we had the numbers in the past, we would have to be doing a lot of manual data crunching and counting and sorting to determine that in the past. So while it might sound like a setback that we had to change our criteria mid-turnaround, because we had digitalized this process, we were able to make those adjustments as appropriate and continue on with our flange inspections without burdening the turnaround in any impactful way. And the other thing that data can do for us, and it's still to come, is analysis and planning for the next event. So flanges that passed this time per our criteria, but maybe only marginally, can be in the planned scope for the next event versus being discovery scope when we open up that flange.
Thank you. Let's talk about success for a second. How close, what did you originally think success was going to look like? How close did you come to that? And secondly, did your definition change, the definition of success change by the end of the turnaround?
So simple success to me was avoiding all of the downfalls of a paper wall chart. So in the past, that literally entailed me running my finger down the list on the wall chart, counting the gaps, and then shuffling through stacks of paper, trying to read handwritten notes that someone wrote in the HF-Alky unit wearing 2 pairs of gloves. And then with that, trying to prove to management that we were done. So if we could avoid that, I would have been happy. Ideally, I envisioned a self-managed system that management could trust for real status updates and that provided quantitative justification for our flange repairs. And I really feel like we got that and more. Our users and management all had good things to say about the solution, and the flange inspections and repairs were completed well before the critical path scope for the event. In addition, talking about success, I'm hopeful that this successful digitalization will pave the way for digitalization of other workflows in our plant.
We said at the beginning of the discussion that the #1 goal of an effective digitalization solution should be production and efficiency. Good, clean, standardized, and digitalized data should be a natural byproduct of an effective bottoms-up digitalization solution. and it should automatically generate production level ROI. So simply put, data availability should not come at the expense of productivity and efficiency. Digitalization, when properly applied and deployed, should enable both. So Stephanie, now that you've had success with this turnaround, this discrete turnaround, how repeatable do you think that this process is? Could this be done at another site or another process, for example?
Absolutely. This can be implemented for other sites and other workflows. I already have ideas of my own for our site. The discovery meeting is really key to that. As long as you can provide information about your current workflow, a good digitalization vendor will be able to tailor their product to those needs and ideally provide cost savings at the same time.
So your next turnaround at this site is likely years away. What are your next steps with this specific solution or process and digitalization in general?
So, like I said earlier, we have more Elke flange data than we've ever had before, and engineers and inspectors like data. So we have time before the next event to really dig in and analyze that data that we haven't had before, and have a far better planned scope than we've ever had in the past. And that data that I speak of is available to us at all times, right now, ready to go in whatever we'd like to do with it. So if we want to pull it out of there and use it in some other analytics software or in Excel, it's available to us. And with the success of this digitalization, I'm personally ready to implement it in other places. I see the potential for digitalization in workflows that are performed frequently and that have data sets that can be standardized. So in any of those cases, my task would be to describe our current workflow, highlight the inefficiencies, find a digitalization solution that I think will work, and then work to gain management approval to move forward.
What would you say to someone that's in your position currently that is coming up on a turnaround or is just looking to optimize their inspection process?
So I have three things I think that I would wrap it up with. The first is start early. Give yourself as much time as possible to make as good of a product as you can. Of course, it's possible in a short time frame. As I gave in this example, we had a turnaround coming. We had a hard turnaround start date, and we had to meet that. But give yourself as much time as possible for the discovery meeting, customization, testing, training, and all of those sort of things. The second I want to hit on again is find a champion. Be the champion. I was actually really excited to show others what we had created and what benefits we could realize from this solution. As the champion, it's your job to spread that positivity. And lastly, is that you can start your transition toward digitalization today. Perhaps our discussion made you think about a workflow at your facility that's primed for digitalization. Maybe you don't have an HF alkylation unit, but maybe you have an inspection process or a PM program that has room for improvement. Jot down your objectives and ideas and reach out to a digitalization vendor to start the conversation.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have quite a few questions coming in. I'm going to take just a moment, look at those questions, and I'll pick a couple here. So there's a lot of questions relating to whether or not this can apply outside of turnarounds and something that you addressed. Are there any key components or characteristics that you think are perfect for that type of digitalization? Do you mind sharing those with us again, and I'll add on?
Sure. So what I want you to think about, definitely, it does not have to be turnaround related, and a lot of my ideas for what I would use it for here at CITGO Lamont is not turnaround related. It's day-to-day, typically inspection based. So what I look at is the workflow. Is it something that you repeat? Because maybe it doesn't make sense to digitalize a workflow that you only do once a year. But if it's something that repeats, and has a data set that can be standardized. That really, to me, lends itself to digitalization. And let me explain what I mean by standardized just for a minute. The data set that I had for our flanges prior to turnaround was kept in a spreadsheet and updated by many, many people over the years. And so when I looked at that, one of the columns was simply the size of the flange. But some people wrote a 2 with a quotation mark for inches. Some people wrote 2 space IN for 2 inches. And there's 10 other ways you can write it. So that's the kind of thing that would be standardized in order to be then digitalized.
Yeah, my thoughts were kind of exactly the same. Where we see an opportunity are those places where visual inspection, fixed asset inspection, any type of non-standardized inspection where the data is great. We're receiving a lot of those data. It's generated from a third-party contractor report, or we're getting that from internal reports, but they live on a PDF, they live in an Excel file or a Word file where you can't grab that data. There's no value to it. And so really the opportunities to digitalize lie and focus around those types of areas where you can digitalize, you can standardize the way in which the asset components are named and labeled, the way that the defect classifications are named, the severity rankings and how those are labeled. So any process in which that's kind of a barrier, or you have multiple contractors, I think is a process that's ripe for digitalization. Let's see the next question here. So a lot of questions, I'll leave this one to you first, and then I'll kind of chime in, Stephanie, but there's a lot of questions on integration, things like document management, how inspectors access information. Can you describe how the digitalization tool became the sole kind of source for all this information? And was it able to integrate all the necessary info for your field workers during the turnaround?
Sure. So, like I said, we had to standardize our data that we had stored in an Excel spreadsheet. So we did have some data to start with, but we had to clean it up, standardize it, and then we uploaded it into our software. Our solution was also able to link a drawing to every single one of those flanges. So now all of a sudden, that's a very integrated couple of taps on a tablet to go from a flange number to seeing an isometric drawing of where that's at in the field, 1, to find it, and 2, to make sure that you're looking at and talking about the right flange. So integration with other systems that we have on site didn't really apply in this case because we didn't have our flanges stored in any sort of system. Some people may. And it's really my understanding that that's also a possibility. And it's something that we might look at in the future, would be integration with other systems on site.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the top down and the bottoms up type of digitalization process that we talked about. So with the top down, it's usually led by that legacy database or that system of record. And then the field tool is a component of that, or it's an afterthought. With a good bottoms up digitalization solution, it should work exactly in the opposite way. You shouldn't need to replace your ERP solution or your asset management database or your RBI tool. A good bottoms-up digitalization tool should complement and assist in productivity and efficiency gained at the site, but it should also make that data available to those systems of record in a way that's consumable and easy to grab. So, they shouldn't be at odds with each other. It should be very complementary from the beginning. You should be able to recognize production and operational level ROI. At the same time, have that data available and ready for implementation and integration with whatever legacy database. And a good digitalization vendor should be able to provide that in whatever way is meaningful with whatever system specific to the client. Let's see what we got here next. Can you describe what was unique about the software that was used to track measured efficiencies and note if flange replacement was required? Can it be used on pressure containment vessels, corrosion tracking, et cetera?
So I think this really gets to configurability. if you have an idea of what you want to use it for, if you want to use it for pressure vessels, if you want to use it for pressure vessel internals, if you can standardize what you're looking for in a pressure vessel internal inspection, then there's a digitalization solution for that. If you're talking about corrosion, maybe external corrosion of piping, if you can explain to someone how you currently handle that workflow and those findings and what you're looking to measure and track, then there's a digitalization solution for that.
Yeah, so, we talked kind of towards the beginning about discovery, and I think this really speaks to discovery. So really anything can be digitalized. Any manual process, any field data collection can be digitalized. The key to it is making sure that you listen to the customer as the SME, but then secondly, you have a framework or a digitalization framework or a digitalization partner that has the ability to quickly configure that solution to work the way that you do as an operator. So it's our job to be the SME as it relates to digitalization. It's not our job to tell you that this is the correct way to do your inspection or to execute your turnaround. And so the software should adapt to you as the client, not the other way around. So I would say if a discovery is there and if the process is done on paper, whether there's third parties or internal resources, it can absolutely be standardized and digitalized. There's really no process that we've encountered that it hasn't worked for yet. Let's look at the next question here. Sorry. What are some of the struggles with having multiple contractors, inspectors, et cetera, involved in an updated database? Are there notifications that can be sent out when the item status is changed, where multiple parties have a role in completing that item?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and something that we didn't touch on, but is definitely a benefit. So the fact that you're talking about multiple contractors is exactly what we ran into, and we had multiple contractors, but the solution that we used really made that a non-issue because everyone was trained the exact same way on the exact same software and did their notifications and their updates and their measurements the exact same way. So really having multiple contractors was a non-issue because we had this digitalization solution. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. I think, when you're sourcing a solution, data collection, standardization of data collection, standardization of the naming components is a big piece. It's a core to it. But there's a lot of other work that happens post just data collection. So workflow, data aggregation, formatting of PDFs, permissioning, who can see what and when. So if it goes from a third party, what data are they able to capture? Then it goes to the supervisor. What can they add? What can they not remove? What's the flow from there? When is the data bundled up? So all of these components are pieces of the digitalization process that are just as important as the data capture and the data roll up, but kind of get lost in the background. So a good digitalization partner is going to spend some time about the data capture on an electronic form. They're going to spend most of their time talking to you about your unique workflow, your unique interaction with third-party contractors, making sure that all the rules and legalities unique to your site are kind of rolled up and the solution's intuitive. So no one sees something that they're not supposed to, but everyone has access to the information that they need to, all in the same kind of ecosphere. So let's see if we have any other questions here. Scrolling through, sorry. So this is asking if you're going to be able to reuse the software. We answered this a little bit, but it's asking if you'll be able to reuse the software for future turnarounds or in any other CITGO site.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did that legwork to standardize our data for this event. And so now that's in the software and it doesn't have to be done again. And so that's the beauty of it, is that this is ready to roll for the next event. And we're already looking at ways to use it if we do any flange inspections externally between the turnaround events. is there any way that we can use this, since our data is already there, to input some of that in as well? So yes, it's usable, and it's ready to go.
Yeah, not much to add to that. I think, best case scenario, you utilize a system for the turnaround and then, follow-up maintenance or for other sites. That way you have all of your inspection data standardized and digitalized in one repository that can then be moved into your asset management database or whatever legacy solution. So, the goal is to have a consistent mechanism for inspection, for turnarounds, for maintenance. And so I think it absolutely could be used on a singular site multiple times. But then that can be translated to other sites, but then recognizing that you still need to go through that discovery process and understand what's unique about site B, what's different, what changes, how's their workflow different? Do they use different third parties? Are they all internally sourced? So there's a lot of nuances, I guess, that can come with site 2, and your digitalization provider should know or be ready for, when we go from site 1 to site 2, that it's not going to be exact cut and paste. That almost never works. There will be changes in uniqueness. And so it shouldn't be a question of, man, I hope that doesn't happen. It's, I'm positive those changes are going to be there, and how can we address them? So the next question's, again, I'll let you start. Who owns the data? Does the digitalization partner or do you?
We own the data. So we own the data that was collected during the turnaround on our flanges. We own the objective criteria and limits that we set for all the flange sizes and classes. That's ours. We own this workflow. It's nothing that we had to release, to our vendor, or give away rights to. It's all ours.
Yeah, I think your data is your data. It shouldn't be looked at. It shouldn't be sold. It shouldn't be touched. Your data is proprietary to you as the asset owner. And so I think any good digitalization vendor is going to take that approach. Make sure that it integrates with your system and keeps your data secure and private and available to you. Whether or not you continue on with that digitalization partner, or after the turnaround you say, well, that was nice, but we're ready to go. That data is yours, and you should be able to retain it always. That should never go away. It says, the next one is, this is a good one. How much time and effort did it take to add data requirements like flange makeup and torquing? And I guess to that extent, another one we didn't talk about a whole lot is, as you rolled out and you implemented, I'm sure there were changes and tweaks and updates that you found during the use. How did those kind of come about, and how rapid was it to make those tweaks and changes on the fly during the turnaround?
So we did beta testing along with, obviously the solution provider did plenty of their own, but we did ours as well. And some of that testing went right up to the start of the turnaround. But working with a good digitalization solution provider, if you have any findings, or if something in the workflow is not producing the exact response or answer that you want, they should be able to make those tweaks and changes for you as needed. And that was our experience. We did find a couple tweaks that we wanted, even up until, right when the turnaround started. And they were able to make those changes for us really quickly, because we needed them quickly. So I think that's part of a good solution provider.
Yeah, the technology now allows these cloud-based, secure mobile data capture engines that are available in solutions. It should allow for almost near immediate changes, tweaks, updates. The days of 18-month SAP, 18-month database rollouts are too long. By the time you get that solution up and running and implemented, it's already outdated. And so the solution needs to be able to evolve with the process and evolve with the learning and evolve with the compliance requirements, not at some time, but in real time. Those should change almost immediately. And so also for adoption, if someone in the field says, man, I wish it did this, to take 6 to 8 months for an operator who needs that functionality in order to do their job effectively, for that to take 6 months, 3 months, anything longer than about a week is burdensome, and it really shows that there's not a lot of confidence in that digitalization provider. So I think that's one of the biggest ones is speed to get those changes and improvements, because it's not, boy, I hope they don't happen. They're certain to happen. And when they do, you need to get that improvement out as quick as possible. Let's see. So this one's for you, Stephanie. It says, how could a contractor proactively bring value to an operator like you with digitalization?
Oh, I really like that question. So I would say that I'm thinking a mechanical contractor, and maybe they meant something different. But if our mechanical contractor did come to us and say, we've used X, Y, and Z solution in other places for this sort of turnaround, would you be interested in exploring it? I don't see how that could hurt. Hearing that something was successful somewhere, remember, not everything is a one size fits all, but hearing that they had success would be great to hear, and at least the owner company can look at that and consider it. So yeah, bringing previous success stories with them as a mechanical contractor working in other plants could definitely be worth taking a look at.
So from my side of the fence, we've seen it go both ways. Both as the asset owner, as the digitalization repository, as that central database that they put out there to their contractors to utilize during a turnaround or for maintenance. We've also seen maintenance contractors who bring the digitalization solution to the owner as a competitive advantage. So contractor can say, I can give you a PDF when I'm done, or a Word document or something to that effect, and I can hand that to you, Stephanie, when it's ready. Or as an asset owner, to know that the contractor can provide you the data in any shape, or form that you want, whenever you want, I think is likely a pretty nice competitive advantage. It gives me an advantage as a contractor, because I'm going to provide you the data and the information that you want, when and how you want, not in the way that I kind of force you to receive it. So we've seen it go both ways. Next question, Stephanie, you mentioned real time a lot. How real time is real time, and was it important, and how important was it?
So I like this question too. Part of our implementation of this was 11 brand new tablets. And so those tablets were in the field in our contractor's hands. Our inspector had a tablet around his neck and with him at all times when he was going out to the field. He had the software, front and center on that tablet. He could access whatever it was that he was looking at. He took his measurements. He took a picture right there, and it went right into that record while he was in the field, entered his measurements while he was standing at the flange in the field taking them. And so before he would get back to the trailer, the numbers and the metrics were already updated, and he didn't have anything else to do when he got back to the trailer. So gone are the days of taking notes in a very messy notebook and then coming back to an office space and re-entering that in some sort of database, or trying to read your own writing to remember which flange you looked at. Those days are gone, because they're doing their data entry and their updates and their findings in the field, and everyone can see that update and their findings the minute they hit enter. And I think I forgot this was a second part of one of those discussions, but also we're talking real time. We did use notifications. So as soon as the inspector completed an inspection and said, this flange needs repairs, the mechanical contractor gets a notification to repair that flange. So whether he's sitting in an office or in the field with a tablet, he got a notification to get ready to repair this flange. So I don't know how much more real time you get than that, but there's definitely a benefit to avoiding the double handling of the data afterwards too.
And something I'll add to that a little bit, kind of tangential to it, is that real time is available if you have connection. So if you have some sort of 3G or Wi-Fi or 4G, LTE, 5G, whatever it is today, real time is available if that happens. Now, for most of the people on this webinar, I imagine that that's not always available. So, you know, there's times in an industrial environment where there is no connection, or you're in a poor signal location, and that's difficult. So I think it's important to find a digitalization solution that has the capability to continue to work full function with or without connection. It's not enough to just have like a web platform that works great if I have a full, great 5-bar connection, and then it just fails or crashes when I don't. So that capability and that availability to work on or offline, I think is vital in an industrial setting like, you know, like you work in. And I think we got time for one more question here. This is for Stephanie. How did you use the permission features of the solution to it says some more questions around allowing third parties and contractors to see the data. Stephanie, how did you use the permission features of the solution to manage that? So contractors' ability to view data and view different components of the turnaround.
Sure. So the inspector would take the data, like we talked about, and we really wanted to protect that. We didn't want anyone else to be able to change their inputs or change their recommendation. So if their recommendation was to make some sort of repair to that flange, that's the recommendation. And so no one could change a recommendation or a number entered by an inspector unless it went through, like we talked about, the engineering review and supporting, you know, further calculations. So that was important to us to protect that data. But we didn't think that it was something that had to be hidden from the contractor. If they are going to make a repair where they remove some of the metal down to a depth of, you know, to remove a defect, then it's important that they see the measured depth of defect. So we wanted them to be able to see those numbers without being able to change them. And so all of those small details that I just talked about what they can view, what they can change, what they can edit, what they can't view, was configured ahead of time during configurability and following the discovery meeting.
Very good. Well, Stephanie, I'm getting the wrap it up cue on my side here. So I wanted to thank you and CITGO and Reuters for joining us today. I think it was a great discussion. I really appreciate your time. Thank all the participants on our side and everyone that joined. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to or you thought we didn't answer completely, I know I'm happy to take additional questions. And Stephanie, I'm sure you're available for those as well.
Sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks again, Reuters, and have a great day. Thank you.